Hi, this is Bob from Turbot. If you're looking for a quick demo of Turbot Guardrails features, you're in the right spot. Today we're going to show how you can sync your ServiceNow CMDB data into Turbot Guardrails. And this is beneficial to bring in your enterprise and business context into your guardrail policies and controls. And so to get started, you would associate your ServiceNow instance just like any other cloud account, your Amazon accounts, your Azure subscriptions, Google projects. ServiceNow is just another scope that now you can add to guardrails. And so you give it credentials and an application scope, and then Turbot will start syncing your resources. Now, I've already associated my dev ServiceNow instance and have also enabled a few CMDB CI tables to sync, like users and cost centers. And so those resources are now added into my environment. And each of those resources I can then drill into. I can view the details of each of those resources. And now all this data is completely searchable in Turbot Guardrails and is possible to bring into your policies to make programmatic decisions when your policies are calculated. You can also enable other CI tables. And so, for example, I have the CMDB CI APPL table, the application table. And here I have about 17 applications that I want to bring into Turbot Guardrails. And that is simply just another CMDB policy. Just like you have an Amazon S3 bucket CMDB policy, an Azure SQL Server policy, whether or not you want to sync that data set into Turbot Guardrails, this is similar. You have ServiceNow policies that you can enable different CI tables with. I have it set to skip, but I can enforce it to be enabled. And so I'll do so here and set that. All of my resources are synced in, and so I can see those from an activity standpoint. So if I was to view that, I could see those resources have been discovered, they've been updated and added into the Turbot Guardrail CMDB, and I can explore and filter those. Those are all available in reporting. So for example, if I wanted to just filter on those ServiceNow applications, I can do so, and those 17 are now in Turbot Guardrails. Now, creation, updates, and deletes handle very similarly, just like your cloud resources. If I wanted to pick on one of the applications to update, show you how Guardrails works. Now, this is very similar to how creations or updates or deletes work with your other CMDB resources, like your Amazon account resources, Azure, Google. And so if I make an update here, that will be reflected almost instantly within Turbot. So for example, here, if I was to make a change to here and a select development for the environment and hit update, that change is now reflected in ServiceNow and will be reflected in Turbot Guardrails. So if I go here onto the resource itself and go to its activity, I will see here that Bob made that change on that resource. And I could see all the configuration details as well as the drift and the difference of what it was to now what it is and what the change Bob made, just like any other cloud resource that Turbot is managing. This type of data is great to have within your policies. And so a common one would be to bring in this type of enterprise context into your tagging policies. And so as an example, within let's say an S3 bucket tag template, I can bring in the application ID, the application name, and the data classification. So the details that are coming from this, so the data classification, the application ID, I can bring into my policies so that I can then tag my resources with that association. And so here I have this tag template set up. And what I'll do is I'll go off and create an Amazon S3 bucket, and we'll see how this data can then be applied. So here I'm going to an Amazon account, and I'm creating an Amazon S3 bucket. So very similar to how tagging demos have been shown in the past. This is where resource is created, or maybe it's updated, and I updated the policy. Turbot's automatically going to orient itself with the details that it needs to then tag down this resource. And so at the start, there's no tags associated, but Turbot is working in the background to then associate those tags. We can already see that Turbot has taken that information from ServiceNow and then applied that directly onto the resource. And so here I have the app name with the CMS app, it's application 001, and the data classification is confidential, similar to what is in the ServiceNow record. Now, that's great for tagging, and that's probably one of the most common use cases, is to bring that context onto the resource itself. But this context of what these resources are is also helpful to then dictate what type of security controls or what type of policy posture that you want to set on your cloud resources. So for example, taking that restricted or taking that data classification tag and saying, well, if that resource is classified as restricted data, therefore, in this example, you must enforce versioning on that S3 bucket. But if it doesn't have that label or doesn't have that association, then disable versioning. Now, of course, anything's possible. You can use multiple different sets of data to then derive whether or not a certain condition gets applied or not. This is just a simple explanation of it. And so that data classification comes into play here. So if I was to update this resource from confidential to restricted and then hit update, so that's updated now in ServiceNow. If I was to go back to that resource, and let's look that resource up, let's CMS Flex, and go to activity. There we're going to see that resource where it's Bob updated it and it changed from confidential to restricted. So similar to what a bucket drift might look like, this is very similar look and feel. They could see the application change here, and then I'm also going to see that change on the bucket itself. And so if I go to look for that bucket, that was called the Acme Turbot Demo 5 bucket, I can also see that change to here where the bucket tags were updated by Turbot because one, the tags itself now are from confidential to restricted. So Turbot took the information from ServiceNow that was updated, then tagged it down to the policy that we had in the other example. And then with that, Turbot then came in and said, okay, we've updated the tags. Those are correct. But your versioning is no longer in an approved state because now that that tag is restricted, that means that versioning must be enabled. And so I had Turbot in enforce mode, and Turbot took the action to enable versioning. And so now versioning is enabled on that bucket, and then that clears the alarm for versioning to an OK state. There are many examples that you can use with the context coming in from ServiceNow into Turbot to make better decisions based on your security posture. If you feel that your organization would benefit from Turbot Guardrails, we would love to talk. Please reach out to us at turbot.com/guardrails, and more information is in the video description below.